Okay, everybody, we're going to be reading this article about Yardangs together. Before we do, you should take note. These are the two questions you're going to have to answer in your Google form in the classwork section. So, question number one: what Earth systems are interacting to create a Yardang? And remember, we've got the hydrosphere, all the water on Earth, the biosphere is the living things, the atmosphere is the air, the geosphere is the Earth itself. So, what Earth systems are interacting to create a Yardang? And then, slightly harder question: what causes Yardangs to be bigger at the top and smaller at the bottom? You'll notice there's a lot of Yardangs shaped like this. They're really big and fat at the top, really small and skinny at the bottom, kind of like an ice cream cone. What causes Yardangs to be shaped like that? All right, so write those two questions down on your whiteboard or on a piece of paper so that you can answer them as we cover it in the reading. And if you have to pause it at any time, you can. All right, press play when you're ready. Okay, Yardangs. So let's see. Yardang comes from the Turkic word yar, which means steep bank. I guess this does have a steep bank. All right, sand blasted. Desert travelers know them by different names. In Egypt, they're called mud lions. In Tunisia, they're called kokhour. In Iran, they're called palut. But if you find yourself face to face with a Yardang, you'll be wondering what it is, not what it's called. Yardangs are ridges of rock and loose sand found in arid or dry places. Many Yardangs look like mushrooms or upside down boats. They can occur alone or in groups, called fields. Yardangs usually line up in the direction of the wind because they're shaped by the wind itself. Wind is a powerful, natural force that causes erosion. As wind blows over land, it picks up and removes sand and small rock particles in a process called deflation. When wind blasts the land surface, the sediment it transports acts like sandpaper, wearing away and changing the shape of the land in a process called abrasion. Gradually, over time, only the yardangs are left. So if you ever find yourself facing a yardang, you might not be sure what to call it, but at least you'll know how it's formed. And here's a field of yardangs. So we just had this one paragraph that kind of talked about how yardings form, but I'm not quite sure I understand. So luckily, there's more. High flying sediment. So here's where we're going to really find out how a yardang is formed. Wind can be a force of weathering the breaking of rocks into smaller pieces. As those rocks bang into each other, they form smaller and smaller pieces, including pebbles, sand, and even dust. Then wind can pick up the dust and sand, blast it against the land, and form yardangs. But how exactly does wind transport this sediment? It depends on the size of the particles. Wind easily picks up and moves dust particles because the particles are very lightweight. Wind tosses the dust thousands of meters up and thousands of kilometers away, but it moves sand grains differently. Sand gets picked up briefly, but it's too heavy to remain airborne for long. Gravity causes the sand grains to fall. The grains get bounced and rolled along the ground, knocking other grains into the air. Sand grains aren't transported as far as dust. Strong wind can slide and roll larger sand grains and even pebbles along the ground too. So we've got this dust that's really light. It gets picked up by the wind and gets blown high up. But the sand and the pebbles, they don't get picked up as high, right? They're going to bounce along the ground. So think about that. Sand and pebbles bouncing along the ground, the dust up higher. I wonder how that contributes to the formation of a yardang. All right, what else can we learn about yardangs? White Sands National Monument in New Mexico has some of the few examples of yardangs in the United States. Do you know that some scientists think that the Great Sphinx in Egypt started out as a yardang and was later carved to look like a lion with a man's head? So could this have started as a yardang and they just kind of carved it? Think about it. Mars has yardangs. What does this tell you about the conditions on Mars? Does Mars have wind? I guess so, right? You need wind and sand and dust and rocks to form yardangs. All right, guys. So remember, if you need to watch that video again, you can. But what Earth systems are interacting to create a Yardang, and what causes Yardangs to be bigger at the top and smaller at the bottom? Go ahead and answer that question in the Google Doc in the classwork section.